Oh, hello there. Yes, you read the thumbnail correctly. I was not kidding when I said back in part 1 that I would rank all of the Creature Cases episodes from the pilot all the way to the very last episode of the latest chapter 6 of the show. But in this case, it's because I wanted to do a separate Creature Cases video where I rank every single episode in a tier list type thing. So do stay tuned for that. And so here I am now, living up to that promise because I don't want to feel like an absolute disappointment that I have been for almost my entire life. Not that this was my reason for doing this. I just wanted to do something crazy throughout the summer. And even though by now it's 2026 and way past the summer of last year, mostly because video production was delayed because I was also busy by then, and also my college, let's say it was hectic. Like, really hectic. But I am just glad I managed to finish the script and uploaded this video to the channel for everyone to enjoy. So I hope you do. Now, before we start, and here's a quick warning, with the side of a few disclaimers. There will be spoilers for Chapter 6 ahead for those who haven't seen it, so get spoiler warninged! Again. Also, because I don't want to deal with copyright claims and the legal BS and stuff, unfortunately, I won't be able to have clips from the actual episodes. I actually have the copyright claim from my previous episode reacting to the Chapter 6 preview, but thankfully Netflix was kind enough to release that claim, so thank you, Netflix. If I do really want to include clips, it's all just gonna be a few seconds long and heavily watermarked, so please bear with me here. Also, I won't be going into too much detail on the animation, nor on what happens in each episode, as this is purely a ranking video. So this won't be some convoluted Saber Spark or Rocketar or Schaeferless kind of video essay thing, so apologies if you're looking for something like that here. I am also not a professional with this kind of stuff, mind you. I'm ranking this entire thing based on personal opinion alone, with a hint of researching here and there. So apologies for that as well if I get some stuff wrong or misinterpreted some things. Now, honestly, I should have added a part about animation in my last TCC video, so that's my fault and I'm sorry again. Lastly, I want to extend my thanks to all the people who made this video possible. All the peeps over at the Creature Cases Discord server, y'all are awesome. Link for that and my own server in the description if you want to join both communities. Many other users and friends also gave their own insight towards the episodes, which opened my eyes to more details I missed, so big shout out to them as well. Next, I want to give a special mention to Firefox Tandemoya. She helped me make many improvements to my script, and I can't thank her enough for all the help. Also, go check her out, her cool art tutorials on her channel, and make them viral. I promise you won't regret it. It's really cool. Finally, I'd like to give another special mention to Tweakamami, aka Tweak Bros on DeviantArt with a 0 for the O. Spelled right here. She makes some of the coolest Creature Cases fan art I've ever seen, and I absolutely love it. So hers and Firefox's socials are linked down below, along with everything else. Alright, that part is done. Now let's dive into the video, shall we? The Creature Cases has come a long way since the premiere of its first set of episodes, Chapter 1, back in 2022. The animation, the storylines, and everything else improving more and more with each new chapter. And I know all of you must be wondering, how exactly would I be ranking each episode? And what are my grounds for covering these rankings? Well, I'm glad you asked, dear viewer. So in this TCC ranking video, I will rank each episode based on 5 different categories. So first off, title appeal. Essentially, the first impression given off by the title card alone. Secondly, story progression. How well the story flows while following the general plot I mentioned back in part 1. You can go check that out if you want. Next up, entertainment value. In other words, how interesting I find the story itself. Any comedic scenes will also contribute to the overall score in this category. Number 4, mystery factor, which is how well they keep the mysterious vibe up until the culprit reveals itself points without making it seem too obvious. Anything that's scientifically factual, but also mysterious in real life will also contribute to this category. And lastly, shock factor. It's exactly what it says. More specifically, this is based off how shocked I get each episode, though I guess this will vary between audiences, so this may be a purely biased category for this ranking. I'm sorry. So whether from a random event or twist happening, or even from when the culprit is revealed, or maybe when I learn something new in the episode, whichever contributes the most in this category. All 5 would have a maximum score of 10, and will be added together for a total score of 50. All the episodes will be sorted based on total score at the end of the video, so whichever episode has the highest total score at the end will be crowned my all-time favorite episode of the Creature Cases. Unless there's a new episode from a possible 7th chapter that will try to contest that ranking, but that's a whole other story for a future video, so stay tuned for that. As I said just now, I will mention a few scenes that caught my attention the most. Also, I'll just be skimming over episodes that are meh to me, so I'm sorry about that in advance. If anyone disagrees with any of my rankings, feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments and make them known. Your insight and feedback matter a lot to me, and it really helps me out in improving my future videos. By the way, you guys, I wanted to add this last minute since I didn't mention this in the original recording. So I wanted to add a 6th category talking about scientific accuracy from like what's being portrayed on the episodes compared to real life, but then I thought, I'm not really knowledgeable with this kind of stuff. I'm more, if anything, I'm more into aviation and just general media that interests me. And so I eventually decided against adding that 6th category because in the end I might have accidentally end up spreading misinformation that I didn't mean to spread. So if anything, if you guys want to point something out that I got wrong, feel free to let me know in the comments down below. Feel free to blast me, criticize, I don't care. It's very much appreciated, that feedback. Alrighty, now that that's out of the way, let's get this Creature Case party started, shall we? Get nice and comfy in your bed, couch, or whatever. Grab a snack, preferably some extra salty popcorn, you know Kit likes that. And let's kick things off with the episode that started it all. Chapter 1, Episode 1, The Mystery on the Monsoon Express. This is one of these 3 27-minute long feature episodes, as I like to call them, and I'll get to the rest in due time. The first episode gives the audience who are supposedly new to the show during that time the gist of what to expect for the other episodes after this one. And it's also 27 minutes long in order for the story to be nicely fleshed out and for the audience to understand the general plot of the episode better. The rest of the episodes in chapters 1 and 3 are basically this first one, but compressed into nearly 10-minute episodes with 2 episodes per segment. And safe to say, this episode really delivered on that. I watched this hoping to be bored, but halfway through it, or even before then, every bit of doubt I had just seemed to vanish. And at the end of the episode, I became immensely invested in the show as a whole, and with every new chapter released every year, my investment grew a lot more. And that's how I became the TCC hyperfixated person I am now. So I feel like it's accurate to say that a lot of people who are fans of this show nowadays started from this first chapter's first episode. So this one in particular, I hold really close to my heart. The episode did a good job keeping me invested in the story, though there were still some parts where it went a little stale. Like in some moments between Sam and Kit meeting one of the big 4 snakes on the train, though that little chase scene with the detective Joe and the saw-scaled viper was exhilarating in a way. As for the big 4 snakes in general, they had their own unique personalities and I was all in on it. So that's amazing. The only thing I still think about is why exactly would Mr. Saw-scaled Viper say that he bit the train engineer by accident because he was startled by her, and then try to cover it up, but then trying to slither away when he got caught, and then act all hostile towards Sam and Kit when they got him cornered. Almost as if he purposefully bit the engineer, but right now I don't really want to go deep into that one that much. And later, I actually found out that saw-scaled vipers in real life tend to be very aggressive when it feels threatened. So I guess that justifies Mr. Viper's behavior in the episode. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below your thoughts and theories, because I would love to hear from y'all. And with that said, I give The Mystery on the Monsoon Express an 8 for title appeal, a perfect 10 for story progression, an 8 for entertainment value, a 7 for mystery factor, and another 7 for shock factor, giving this episode a 40 out of 50 total. 40 out of 50 total score. Gosh, it wasn't hard to make an unbiased rating for this one, despite the many compliments I said earlier, but it still wasn't easy either. This just goes to show that even the best show's episodes still have their flaws, and this will be evident as we keep going. Up next on our list is an episode I honestly have the most vivid memory of. Chapter 1, Episode 2A, The Riddle of the Raging Rhinos. Now from this point on, up until Chapter 3, but not including Chapter 2, every segment on the chapter lists are split into 2 different episodes. And this is the first one of the second segment after Monsoon Express. I believe that the reason why I have such a vivid memory of this, and the next 3 episodes I'll be talking about, was because it was free to watch on the Netflix Junior YouTube channel for everyone to watch. And I'd occasionally watch this during the time after I finished binge watching Chapter 1 back then, and as I've recently checked that YouTube channel, they've been posting more episodes from the other chapters, so people who don't have Netflix can still enjoy those episodes of the newer chapters. And safe to say, I really appreciate that they even decided to do that in general. So thank you, Netflix, but also thank you for releasing my copyright claim on my previous TCC video. So thank you. Thank you so much. So now that the episode time frame has been compressed, how exactly does this story's progression go now? Well, they still did a good job keeping the solid plot overview in the episode, and there weren't any rushed parts either, which makes it even better. Plus, the fact that they even managed to squeeze in a little chase scene is awesome. So if I were to complain about something in this episode, it would be the voice acting.
Without the go-kart.
I just like drawing go-karts.
Kit's voice here sounded so damn robotic, it almost felt unsettling. But to give the voice actress Neka Okoye some credit, sorry if I mispronounced that, it was still the first episode of the second segment. The voice actors could still be getting used to their roles at this point of production, so I decided to Control+X the people hear some slack, if you know what I mean. Anyway, I don't have much to say now, so I'm gonna give this a 7 for title appeal, 8 for story progression, another 8 for entertainment value, 6 for mystery factor, and a 9 for shock factor, giving this episode a 38 out of 50 overall score. Slightly lower than the first episode, but mainly because of the very compressed episode time frame. But also, I did learn more about genets in this one, so that contributed to the shock factor. Chapter 1, Episode 2B, The Trouble in the Tundra. Less than memorable episode for me, but it was still okay. This is the second half of the second segment, and I will say it's not as exciting as the episode before it. It still did get me somewhat engaged in the goings of the episode. The story also progressed very smoothly throughout the runtime, so that's a plus. I also like how the twist was that Bill and Jill, aka the Mice Squad, weren't actually missing or in trouble in this episode. Just going undercover to get audio samples from the Muskoxen, but they weren't able to properly contact Clade HQ about what they were doing because of some, let's say, crazy coincidences, leading to a misunderstanding. I won't spoil anything here, but still, I do find the episode okay. Just about. And I also like that subtle foreshadowing in the Muskoxen herd, where you can see that one particular bundle of fur looking rather sus. I'll let you guys decide what it actually is. I also want to say that this is the episode where they introduced the snow cycles, or just regular cycles for every other occasion. And I'm mentioning this because throughout some episodes of this and the other chapters, we get to see the duo utilize these vehicles in certain scenarios. It's like another cool tool that they used a lot when it was first introduced in Chapter 4, Episode 1. I think we're getting too ahead of ourselves here. This episode gets an 8 for title appeal, 8 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and another 7 for shock factor, with a 38 out of 50 total score. I still like the twist at the end though, and I'm pretty sure a lot of keen-eyed viewers would have noticed the sus-looking bundle of fur in the oxen herd, so congrats to everyone who saw it at first glance. Now I just want to go off script for a minute here. I think this is what TCC is all about, like using your own detective mind to like discover subtle foreshadowing clues in the background of the episodes to like kind of figure out what is going to happen next. So kudos to that. Chapter 1, Episode 3A, The Puzzle of the Plummeting Eggs, introduces us to the bumbling bastard that is Wally Bungler. And I have to say, this character was 50-50 for me during Chapter 1, and by extension all the other chapters. But I've generally come to like him over time, so good job with that, I guess. And I also love how when Wally first crash lands in the scene in his first ever appearance in the show, our detective duo was slightly skeptical about him. But as he makes more and more appearances over the other episodes, our main protagonists have now become very close to Wally, at least when compared to this episode, that is. I don't have much to say for this episode in general, except for the fact that Wally has now supposedly become a foster dad to a bunch of baby cuckoo birds, which, in all honesty, is a very wholesome ending to the episode. I'm just kidding. They're just his friends. Or are they? Anyway, Puzzle of the Plummeting Eggs. 6 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 6 for mystery factor, and 8 for shock factor, giving this episode a 33 out of 50 overall score. I feel like the culprit seemed way too obvious, in my opinion. Also, aside from Wally, the episode was not just that engaging for me. Not even the chase scene, if I'm being honest. So, many apologies if someone else happened to like this episode. Chapter 1, Episode 3B, The Missing Mole Rat Princess, has a lot of familiar faces. Now, if you've already watched Part 1, you'll remember that I mentioned the Jeanette running the Oasis bar in that one scene. And she happens to be the same Jeanette from Riddle of the Raging Rhinos. And that also included Polly the Tickbird as well. He was also there in that scene as a customer, I just never explicitly mentioned him along with the Jeanette in Part 1. Thankfully, Editor Paul came to the rescue, so thank you, Editor Paul. Now, I don't know about you guys, but this episode had a very casual vibe going midway through it. And yes, it's the Oasis bar scene again. But the casualness felt relaxing in a way. I mean, our dynamic duo was barely able to outrun a freaking Dust Devil just before the scene, so that casual vibe with the Oasis bar was very much welcome. And did I mention that they were barely able to outrun a Dust Devil and barely save the Mole Rat Princess from being an owl's dinner? Okay, I don't think I mentioned the latter. Okay, so it's an 8 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, a 9 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and 6 for shock factor, with a 38 out of 50 total score. Episode 4A, The Hunt for the Hidden Hive, introduces us to what looks like a one-time character at first, but then he makes an appearance in another episode, which I'll get to later. Indy the Honey Guide is a field agent in the African grasslands that helps Sam and Kit find a lost honeybee's hive after her parents just upped and moved out of the old one without even telling her. Man, talk about parenting, okay. Okay, I'm sorry about that. There's not much to say about this episode, but I do love the feeling of seeing a new face in this episode who's a part of the same agency that Sam and Kit are working for. Also, Flying Cat, and the fact that Sam trying to do the honey guide call was cringe as all heck, but that's to be expected in a typical cliche like this one. With that being said, this episode gets a 6 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor. Now, these next 2 episodes struck me as bizarre at first watch, and it's more because of what I learned about the featured animals in these episodes than the episode story itself. Let's start with Chapter 1, Episode 4B, The Trouble of the Toppled Trees. And how does the director scratch? Say these tongue twisters, gosh. One thing I did like about this episode is how I learned a bit about how beavers and gophers chew down trees in their own way, with beavers chewing the trunk that's above ground, while gophers usually chomp down the roots of the trees underground, which in turn weaken the trees and cause them to fall down. Not that I didn't learn about that back then, but it's a nice refresher, so that's nice. Now, in terms of story, I'm not so into the way they implement the moral of this episode, but I may just be biased here. It's still a very solid story, and I won't complain any further about it. So, 6 for title appeal, 7 story progression, 6 entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and 7 shock factor, with a 34 out of 50 total score. That's not going to keep me from being fascinated at the animal facts I mentioned just now. The second episode that struck me as bizarre was episode 5A, The Mysterious Fruit Thief. And yes, it was because it was after I watched that episode that I realized that Mouse Deer had fangs. It may just be a small detail, but I'm still quite surprised at the fact. Also, the character design for the Mouse Deer is just so damn adorable. I love it. I have nothing else to say here as well, except for the fact that I can't believe Sam and Kit saw fang marks on a fruit and immediately thought of a carnivorous snake. Kind of stupid on their part. But I actually find it interesting since having supposedly experienced characters make rookie mistakes makes them just a little bit more realistic. And I love that as well. Title appeal gets a 6, story progression 8, entertainment value 7, 8 for mystery factor, and 9 for shock factor, with a 38 out of 50 total score. Calling all Kit Casey fans out there, prepare to relive your worst nightmare. I'm just kidding. Chapter 1, Episode 5B, The Riddle of the Wrestling Lizards, is an example of the classic cliche where one of the protagonists in the duo are rendered unfit to carry out the mission due to something unexpectedly bad happening, so the other protag has to go out there by themselves, occasionally being helped by their friend through other means of communication. I personally have no comments about that, but what I do want to know is what the heck prompted the two Gila monsters to just randomly bite Kit on each arm like that. I mean, sure, it's for comedic effect given the scenario, but my guess it's because of Kit's initial interaction where she's asking them both to calm down and talk about it. And the lizards just had a delayed reaction to that, I guess, and when they finally did react, they, in all their lizardly wisdom, decides to latch onto each of her arms, which definitely was an unexpected surprise there. Okay, enough reminding Kit Casey fans out there about this traumatic experience. Aside from what I mentioned earlier, as well as Peggy's unexpected appearance in the episode climax, the episode itself didn't really appeal to me as a whole. So that's a 6 for title appeal, since the episode title card already spoiled that part. Another 6 for story progression, 5 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 9 for shock factor, with a 34 out of 50 total score. I have nothing new to say about Chapter 1, Episode 6A, Disappearing Dung Ball, except that this episode is literally full of shit. Jokes aside, it didn't catch my attention that much, aside from a lot of side characters making their appearance in this episode, so that's that. So that being said, 4 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 5 for entertainment value, 6 for mystery factor, and 5 for shock factor, with 26 out of 50 total score. I'm sorry if anyone else disagrees, but yeah, again, this episode didn't interest me that much, and I'm sorry again. Now, this is another episode where I learned something new. Chapter 1, Episode 6B, The Search for the Spotted Frog. I was 10 years old when I found out that tarantulas kept frogs as pets in a way. I'm genuinely still wondering how the heck they do that in real life, but yeah, tarantulas keep frogs as pets for them to watch over their eggs. As Kit explains in the episode, it's a mutualistic relationship where if the frog protects the tarantula's eggs, the tarantula protects the frog from other predators that are after it. So that's a 5 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 5 for mystery factor, and 8 for shock factor, with a 26 out of 50 total score. Chapter 1, Episode 7A, The Case of the Big Chomp, gets a 7 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 30... Sorry, lots of gas coming out. With a 35 out of 50 total score. I like this episode even though I have no other comments about it other than how suspenseful this was compared to the rest. I also like how it points out the difference between Crocs and Gators in the most basic, dumbed down way possible. Episode 7B, The Secret of the Salt Cave. Salt. It holds a lot of secrets. And baby elephants, apparently. Really, the only thing I can take away from this is that Kit really loves her popcorn drenched in sodium chloride. And while I was also a bit excited about them wanting to find a new cave creature and then being thoroughly disappointed that it wasn't a new cave creature, I was still surprised about the fact that elephants go into salt caves to scrape the sodium chloride coated cave walls and consume them for nutrients. And actually, this is something that elephants at Mount Elgin do, which is located on the border of Kenya and Uganda. And while it's not that clear on Ron's map, it does pin the rough location of where Uganda would be on Africa. So mega job for scientific accuracy nonetheless. So 5 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and 6 for shock factor, with a 32 out of 50 total score. Episode 8A, The Case of the Blue Bandit. gets a 6 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 5 for mystery factor, and 6 for shock factor, with a 30 out of 50 total score. I have nothing else to say about this other than the same thing with the previous episode, except blue. Now Stevie T does it better. Chapter 1, Episode 8B, The Honey Badger Break-In, introduces us to a side character from Episode 4A, The Hunt for the Hidden Hive, Sweetie the Honey Badger. Don't let his name fool you though. He's one badass honey badger that will terrorize any beehive that comes his way. I also love how he's the supposed twist antagonist of this episode. I say twist antagonist since calling him a twist villain may be a stretch here in my opinion. But also this character really reminds me of Bunga from the Lion Guard, except more middle-aged like, you know? But aside from that, I have nothing else to say about this other than I feel like the bees in the Africa of their universe are just general douchebags, but I digress. I mean, Sweetie did trash the colony's old hive in the first place, which is why they migrated to Ron. But everything did work out in the end, all thanks to Sam and Kit's quick thinking. Now Sweetie's the official guard of that particular bee colony's hive, and he gets paid in honey. Now that's coexisting at work. Or as Kit would say, a mutualistic relationship. So that's a 6 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, 6 for mystery factor, and 5 for shock factor, with a 32 out of 50 total score. In my opinion, Chapter 1, Episode 9A, The Unidentified Shiny Object, was one of my least favorite episodes in the first chapter, and by extent, the entire series. I'm sorry. Probably because I'm not someone who's into that UFO paranormal type of stuff. Well, at least now I know why it looks like hundreds of baby spiders look to be crawling out from inside a mother spider's body when you swat it. This episode gets a 4 for title appeal, 5 for story progression, 4 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, I'll give it that, and an 8 for shock factor, with a 28 out of 50 total score. This is exactly why I've gotten into the creature cases, as I've always learned something new after watching each episode while getting a good detective-type thriller vibe to boot. I'm pretty sure I've already made that clear. And in the case of Chapter 1, Episode 9B, the case of the crying monkey, I learned that Margay cats are a thing, and they can imitate certain animal sounds to confuse and lure their prey. Nature is truly a fascinating thing, let me tell you guys. So, always take care of it, okay? Okay? Do you guys understand? Please, what? I beg you. So this episode gets a 4 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 6 for shock factor, with a 28 out of 50 total score. This is your reminder to drink your water. Don't want to get dehydrated. This episode, Episode 10A, The Search for the Silver Anthill, was highly debated among my fellow friends/fans of the show, since it literally showed a character in a near-death scenario. And had it not been for the last-minute save by those lost Silver Ants fellow comrades, she would have genuinely died in that heat from dehydration and hyperthermia. So very obviously the shock factor score would have shot through the roof, all things considered, but I may just be exaggerating. Still, I find this episode a good watch, so that's a 6 for title appeal, 8 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, 5 for mystery factor, and a perfect 10 for shock factor, with a 36 out of 50 total score. Sorry if my Discord notifications were sounding. Chapter 1, Episode 10B, The Search for the Swamp Snapper, features a massive snapping turtle. And yes, snapping turtles in real life can bite your finger off. But in the case of this big-ass snapper, it might split you in half. So yeah, always beware of snapping turtles, big or small, because you really don't want to lose any part of your body to those bastards. Unless you really want to give them a haircut so badly for the sole purpose of keeping them from destroying stuff and probably killing the local residents, but yeah. With that, this episode gets a 7 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, 6 for mystery factor, and another 8 for shock factor, with a 36 out of 50 total score. Now, here's an example of the show toning it down for the sake of keeping things for all audiences. Chapter 1, Episode 11A, The Puzzle of the Poisonous Leaves. And I think I forgot to mention this, but Gila monster venom can make you really sick. So, yeah, they were also downplaying on that as well. Some poisonous leaves may just leave you with a small itch, because that's what they do. But even for healthy leaves, or healthy-looking leaves, there are some that will cause some more serious issues when an animal eats them. But that's only if they're matured. as I've heard. After doing some Googling, I learned that howler monkeys not only eat the young tender leaves from trees like figs, ficus, and ramon or breadnut, they also only eat those specific trees' leaves. So it's unclear which of the leaves in particular they ate in that restaurant, as again, the episode doesn't tell us much about that. Plus, all the leaves mentioned do indeed get poisonous and unsuitable for consumption as they mature, so that's a bonus for that detail. Though the poison leaves causing the very specific problem of the howler monkeys falling over the balcony is pretty funny to me. What's not funny though is the fact that in real life, if a howler monkey does end up consuming a mature poisonous leaf, the nutritional stress caused by sickness can be fatal in some cases. Thank you for being scared. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I really feel like Sam and Kit, as well as a secondary character for the episode, managed to find an illegal leaf smuggling operation and then just forgets about it after they evaded the enemy's attacks. Just, what? That would have been an interesting thing, but I guess fun facts first before the action stuff. I mean, they could have done that as well, but also, like, planting new trees for, the howler monkeys to enjoy. Anyway, as for the secondary character in question, I'm not too impressed with how him and our detective duo switched dynamics so suddenly, the few minutes after they first met, from being unsure with each other to having superior teamwork skills. But regardless, I still love Philip Knight, the night monkey. And I also love the detail where the seed spitting that Philip does spreads the seeds from the fruit he eats, which makes those seeds grow into new plants, which after some more googling is indeed something that they also do in real life. And that behavior is not just limited to night monkeys, but I won't go deeper into that as well. So this gets a 7 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and another 7 for shock factor. That's a lot of 7s. With a 36 out of 50 total score. There's nothing much to say about Chapter 1, Episode 11b, The Mystery of the Missing Hair, so I'll just give it a 5 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 6 for shock factor, with a 31 out of 50 total score. We got cute bunnies here, though. I'm sure Sky will like that. Unfortunately, she is in the main channel. The last 2 episodes of Chapter 1 teaches us about interesting creatures I've never known about until now. Let's start with episode 12a, shall we? The Secret of the Sand Serpent. Or at least they thought it was a serpent until we saw that it was a pink fairy armadillo. They are apparently a thing, and I feel stupid for not knowing what they were sooner than this. With that being said, but also the fact that Kit is scared of loud noises, which is known as phonophobia, this episode gets a 7 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and 6 for shock factor, with a 34 out of 50 total score. Last but not least, for Chapter 1, we have episode 12b, The Disappearance of Peggy Scratch. Not gonna lie, this episode was the most cringe for me, as we see the duo acting like arguing friends in the middle of a supposedly deserted island. Classic duo arguing with each other kind of trope, I guess. But as it turns out, they're not at just some random deserted island. They are what's called Inaccessible Island, which is in the South Atlantic Ocean. But ironically, and out of sheer coincidence, they managed to access Inaccessible Island by crash landing on it. Just saying that out loud makes me want to laugh my balls out. I also want to mention that Inaccessible Island was declared a World Heritage Site by UNESCO. So basically, the duo, along with Peggy Scratch, who was riding along with them, crash landed at a UNESCO World Heritage Site. I'm pretty sure Clay's gonna be fined a hefty penny for that. Though I'm not sure if there's a version of UNESCO in their universe, so that's just a theory, I guess. There's also a species of flightless birds over there known as Inaccessible Island Rails. And yes, they like to boogie their hearts out, both in the show and in real life. They are also the world's smallest flightless birds, which makes them even more unique. Apparently, there's also a building somewhere in the coastal area of that island, which is a research cabin for scientists. So I guess it's not that inaccessible to begin with. Anyway, this episode gets a 7 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 33 out of 50 total score. And that wraps up all the episodes of Chapter 1. Honestly, they had a few boring episodes and some least liked ones, but it's still a strong start to a show that would later become one of the things I'm hyperfixated on, aside from Zenless Zone Zero and Paw Patrol and the like. And so with that out of the way, we can finally move on to the second chapter of the show. And it contains literally one episode for this dedicated chapter itself. And for good reason, since it's a holiday special. So let's not waste any more time and talk about the single chapter in Chapter 2, Episode 1, The Missing Mammoth, a Holiday Mystery. I don't know why I still had to number the episode. Muscle memory, I guess. Now, I have a lot of mixed feelings for this episode. Some good, some bad, and some I can't even describe. This whole special was a roller coaster ride for me that I have no idea how I'm even able to comprehend what just happened in that episode. Also, we see Indy again. Yay! Gosh. Even though it's 27 minutes long, and yes, this is the second feature episode after the Monsoon Express one, everything seemed to happen so fast. But that was probably just me. Now, I don't think the whole thing feels rushed, but it does feel like everything that led up to Sam and Kit being accidentally time traveled back to the Ice Age feels like a freak coincidence. Like a northeastern wind rocking the damn snowman ornament onto the time travel button by chance after they opened the box that was covering the button. Like, how in the heck does that happen out of pure coincidence? Well, there was no avoiding that anyway, since the plot demanded it needed to happen. And so here we are, in the bloody friggin' Ice Age, where our seemingly cooked duo find themselves encountering the woolly mammoths of that time. And that's where I stopped myself from further spoiling the episode for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. Now, the entire special itself is available to watch on Netflix Junior's YouTube channel for free. Thanks again, Netflix. Now, in my very honest opinion, this episode really did not sit well with me. But that's not to say I hated it. It was still a very solid episode, and the part where it feels like all hope is lost, the feeling was almost palpable when I first watched it. Like this looming sense of dread, maybe Sam and Kit might be forever stuck in the past. They might be a fragment of ancient history in the present day. I don't know. I really appreciate this deep feeling in a kid's show, and I'm also very in on it. Plus, the suspense at the end was cool too. I love that part. So while I was unsure about the episode in itself at first glance at the title card, everything about it sort of made up for it in a way. So good job, TCC team. And now for my rating. I'll give the holiday special a 4 for title appeal, 8 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 9 for mystery factor, and 9 for shock factor, with a 37 out of 50 total score. I wasn't sure where to add the extra points for the deep feels, so I decided, screw it. I'll put the points in mystery and shock factor. You're welcome. Let's move straight to chapter 3 now. But before that, I just want to mention that this chapter's episodes are probably the weakest among the entire series. Like, there's not as many episodes as the first chapter that's worth mentioning, and not as many episodes as chapter 1 in general, but the episodes that were indeed worth mentioning are actually really good. Let's start things off with Chapter 3, Episode 1A, The Forest Food Bandit. This episode features a one-time character whom we later find out is known as Roxy Raider. We also find out that Director Scratch, during her days as an agent like Sam and Kit are right now, had also encountered this raccoon character, but the case regarding Roxy was never solved until that present day. Cliche. I really like seeing new and unfamiliar faces like this one in the show, as I've said before, but I guess that was for the ones that work in Clade, I guess. Even though a lot of the previous episodes are full of that. But Roxy was something else. She was a pretty good antagonist in this episode. Though what kind of killed the vibe was how easy it was to catch her in the episode climax, so I didn't mind. I still like this episode anyway. Well, I just want to mention that this Chapter 3 thumbnail looks a lot like Kit is being held hostage by Roxy or something. Man, I can't unthink that anymore whenever I see the thumbnail. Anyway, I'm gonna give this an 8 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 6 for mystery factor, and another 6 for shock factor, with a 33 out of 50 total score. Roxy, you sneaky bastard. Chapter 3, gosh damn it. Chapter 3, Episode 1B, The Case of the Absent Giraffe, gets a 4 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 4 for entertainment value, 5 for mystery factor, and 5 for shock factor, with a 24 out of 50 total score. In terms of what I learned about giraffes in this episode, that's still that. However, the story really soured my score, so sorry about that. Not that it's bad, it's just not as appealing to me as the others. Chapter 3, Episode 2A, The Frozen Stowaways. I did not know Arctic woolly bear moths were a thing, and thank you TCC for teaching me about its existence. It's crazy how they can basically get preserved Ice Age style and still be able to turn into adult moths when the ice melts. Feels like this is nature's way of cryogenic containment, I guess. Is that what it's called? Anyways, that's a 6 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and another 7 for shock factor, with a 34 out of 50 total score. Another batch of 7s. I love how Chapter 3, Episode 2B, The Puzzle of the Empty Pond, embodies most of the traits of an average American Karen into a flatwood salamander. And I say most, because she doesn't double down on her BS while Sam and Kit were just trying to help her. But to be fair, I think she has good reason for that, since she's a soon-to-be mom and worried about her eggs, so I'll maybe cut her some slack there. So with that, this gets a 5 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 6 for shock factor, with a 31 out of 50 total score. This is one of the few episodes in Chapter 3 that were heavily talked about among my friends. And that's Chapter 3, Episode 3A, The Undercover Hyena. There wasn't much to talk about, but all I can say is that I freaking love how Sam tries to fit in with the Hyena clan, and even going as far as to pretend fight Kit and act like he's driving her away just to get their approval. Don't worry though, it all worked out in the end, but man, that scene in particular was hilarious. Excellent teamwork showing there. So with that being said, this episode gets a 7 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 9 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 8 for shock factor, with a 37 out of 50 total score.
I don't think we'll be seeing that hideous creature ever again.
Really?
Chapter 3, Episode 3B. The Stranger in the Burrow has a lovely ending to it. I don't know why, but I just had that nicer feeling when the animals reconciled in the end of this episode in particular. So 7 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 5 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and another 7 for shock factor, with a 32 out of 50 total score. I don't know what to say about this, but I'll try. Episode 4A, The Batcave Crisis, is where they shove our detective duo out of the spotlight in place of the bumbling bastard Wally Bungler. What the frick? Though Sam and Kit weren't completely shunned away in this episode, they do at least give Wally some helpful advice as he tries to solve the case on his own. And to give Wally some credit, and some spoilers for this episode, he did do a good job at the end. Also, tail-itis? What in the actual heck? Anyway, 5 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 31 out of 50 total score. Now, I should probably remind you guys, and this also applies to the next episode I'll be ranking. Chapter 3 was released during a time when capybaras were a popular thing, apparently. And episode 4B, The Mysterious Ant Circle, features a capybara family that we will also see in the next episode. There's not much to point out here except for how in the actual heck does Kit's foot get stuck under a tree root when it looked like she just tripped on it. This doesn't make sense at all. It almost seems like the plot just forced the situation upon Kit because they suddenly remember that she still has to learn that lesson about staying still for long periods of time. And as someone who tends to fidget and move around a lot, I honestly wish I had those lessons as well. So this episode gets a 7 for title appeal, 8 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 5 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 34 out of 50 total score. I still don't understand how Kit's foot got stuck like that. Gosh. Damn. Chapter 3, Episode 5A, Lost Capybara Kids. I'm not singing that capybara song. I might get copyrighted. Sorry. Not much to say about this, except for the two arguing that which skill set is more superior with solving creature cases. I'm pretty sure they had that argument way before. Back when they were... sorry. Spoilers for another episode of the video. Anyway, this gets a 5, a 7, a 5, another 7, and a 6. 30 out of 50 total score. Never would I thought I'd hate a secondary character, or in this case, a group of secondary characters, so freaking much in Chapter 3. And yet, here we are. Actually, another secondary character in another chapter's episode beats the ones here in terms of how much I hate them, but we may be getting too ahead of ourselves here. For now, let's talk about Episode 5B, The Case of the Curious Kias, More like absolutely freaking infuriatingly annoying he is. I really hate characters like this with a burning passion. I'm sorry. Maybe that's just my short temper doing its stuff, but yeah, that's... Okay, I finished talking about this episode, so 5 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 5 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 30 out of 50 total score. I kinda want deep fried Kias for dinner now. Episode 6A, The Legend of the Night Howler, features a scorpion character named Barb. And yes, she appears in a later episode in Chapter 3. And yes, this is another case of me finding out about an animal I've never heard before. And in this case, it's the elusive Night Howler, aka the grasshopper mouse. It's also scientifically accurate in every way, with a special mention being Barb getting attacked by said mouse, which is relevant to the fact that these rodents are also very aggressive predators and they're immune to scorpion stings. So good job on that. So 8 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 37 out of 50 total score. Episode 6B, The Haystack Stakeout, does not appeal to me that much, but I can't help but think of that one particular pocket monster whenever I see Pikas or hear their names. But they're also so damn adorable, I kinda wanna keep one as a pet. Anyway, 6 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 4 for entertainment value, because we're just staking out most of the time, 5 for mystery factor, and 5 for shock factor, with a 25 out of 50 total score. Episode 7A, The Case of the Scorpion Sting, is like the riddle of the wrestling lizards, but this time it's Sam that's become unavailable to help Kit out in the case. At least not in person. But just like the wrestling lizards episode, he occasionally calls Kit to help her out, but I guess it's more like begging her to get him out of the sorting paperwork and stuff, so... Also, Barb makes her reappearance in this episode too, so yay on that. And so on that note, I have nothing else to say, as the episode in itself was pretty basic. So that's a 7 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and 6 for shock factor, with a 35 out of 50 total score. Last up for Chapter 3 is Episode 7B, The Case of the Constant Dripping. Yeah, no, I'm not into this episode at all. I'm very sorry. I feel like they ran out of ideas for a last episode for Chapter 3, but somehow they managed to squeeze in a relevant plot and animal fun fact in the story, so props to them for that one at least. But also we get a background character that's now being shown the spotlight here. Cubby, the junior agent. We normally see her in a handful of throwaway scenes that take place in the Clade HQ, but now she's joining our detective duo in their case in this episode. Also, they're super senior agents in this episode now. So congrats you two. You made it so far into your careers and I'm very proud of you. However, despite all this, the episode premise in general didn't appeal to me. And while I was gonna give this a 3 for title appeal, after I saw Cubby in the title card, I decided to give it the benefit of the doubt. So with that, it's gonna be a 4 for title appeal. Along with a 6 for story progression, 5 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 6 for shock factor, with a 28 out of 50 total score. Now, as I mentioned earlier, Chapter 3 was one of the weakest chapters in the series, but at least they made up for it in the chapters afterwards, so good job on Redemption Arc, TCC. You're really doing me good here. Hello YouTube, this is a re-recording of the Chapter 4 section of this video, so this will be the only time I'll be showing my face here for the entirety of the chapter. Of me ranking the 4th chapter, because I just realized that the noise reduction on my phone is complete doo-doo, and so I'm remaking that recording, so I'm sorry for that. Chapter 4 is where the Creature Cases production team takes it up a notch on pretty much a lot of the things of the show, but at the cost of episode quantity though. But it was a worthwhile sacrifice, as we now get 16-minute long single episodes compared to the 2 smaller 10-minute episodes combined into one solid 28-minute segment. Everything about this and the 5th chapter feels like they did a major overhaul on how they should make the episodes, as well as how they animated everything. And the movements feel more real and fluid, among other animation improvements like the general colors and the like. But even though I'm an animation student back in senior high, we've never really been taught about 3D animation. It was just strictly 2D during that time. But will the scores also improve in this and the other chapters episodes going forth? Let's find out as we get started with Chapter 4, Episode 1, The Spider's Stolen Silk. I had a mild case of overhaul shock when I was watching this episode, mainly because of the stuff I mentioned just now. But man, I really loved how this episode flowed with the extra few minutes of runtime. Also, we get to see a new type of tool they use, which is also prominently seen in this and the other chapters episodes. The Clade Claws. And that basically turns them into Spider-Man of sorts. If you could bear the dog barking, I'm very sorry about that. The dogs decided to be noisy at the worst time possible. But aside from that, we still have the classic episode formula, except now it's been blessed with the few extra minutes it needs. So, Chapter 4, Episode 1 gets a 6 for title appeal, 8 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 6 for mystery factor, and another 6 for shock factor, with a 33 out of 50 total score. Pretty average so far, but let's see if that will change. I think foxes are amazingly adorable, and Chapter 4, Episode 2, The Mystery in the Snow Maze, brought me lots of baby Arctic fox cuteness. I also love the fact that we have Kit, a hot weather fox, and the cold weather Arctic fox in the same episode. Also, the bumbling bastard Wally Bungler is back. And yeah, he's pissed me off a little in this one, but not by a lot, honestly, as he did made up for his and also Sam's screw up in the middle of the episode. I have nothing else to say other than those honorable mentions, so now I'll give this a 7 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 6 for shock factor, with another 33 out of 50 total score. Chapter 4, Episode 3, The Case of the Stinky Swamp, was definitely something. And for once, as the episode description says, it isn't the Stinkwells to blame, or the jokes either, for the stink in the swamp. And surprisingly, it's not the 3 main suspects either, but I'll let you guys guess the real culprit behind the smell. And as somebody who's into certain strong scents, somehow, but reacts violently to other more unpleasant smells, or ones that are too strong for me to handle, I kind of feel for Kit here. And funny story incoming. Back in late October 2025, I was tasked to make a fiber cloth laminate using resin and obviously fiber cloth with a buddy of mine. That was part of the discussion about composite materials for aircraft and how to make them. And even though the gas mask that I was using blocked off the fiber cloth particles, my goodness, the resin odor was aggressively killing my nose the whole 3 hours I was in the maintenance lab. It was tough. And I also had to come back there a second time later that semester because we needed to learn how to fix said resin laminate that we made after we purposefully broke it. But with that aside, let's get on with the rating. So episode 3 gets a 7 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and another 8 for shock factor, with a 45 out of 50 total score. So far, this is the highest scoring episode of this overall ranking, even surpassing the Monsoon Express episode, mainly because I was surprised at how incredibly expressive the way the characters are in terms of their movements and facial reactions in this episode. Really good improvement there. I hope they keep this up in the other episodes down the line. And not to mention the plot twist as well at the end. Again, I'll let you guys guess that part. And that kind of added to the shock factor score as well. Trees don't talk, but Chapter 4, Episode 4, The Case of the Talking Tree, seems to tell us otherwise. Well, obviously they don't talk, but I still love that fun fact about crickets using leaves with holes chewed on them to basically amplify the noise they make. So that's a 7 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and another 7 for shock factor, with a 32 out of 50 total score. Yet another batch of 7s. Now this is an interesting one. Episode 5, The Trail of the Tuatara, teaches the classic moral of never jumping into conclusions, and that's pretty much it. I still like that message though, as well as the cool plot twist in the episode climax. So anyway, 6 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and a 9 for shock factor, with a 36 out of 50 total score for this episode. Let's move on to Chapter 4, Episode 6, The Disaster at the Dust Spa, Frankersham. Sorry, I can't resist making that pun. This was a pretty average episode, though I still like the fact that some animals prefer to bathe in dust to clean themselves off instead of a water bath. I guess Sam and, to some extent, Kit, could use something like that in the dorms that they both share in Clade HQ. Though, to be fair, that would be a whole other problem in and of itself, considering it's dust, and dust can go everywhere. I should know. So I guess that's off the things to renovate in their dorms, I guess. I don't know. So that's a 6 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 34 out of 50 total score. Now, Chapter 4, Episode 7, The Mysterious Swamp Rats, was a more appealing episode to me. And you know me, I love a good episode where there's actual life or death scenarios that play out where it's always a close call. Yes, that's a cliche that exists, and it's also the Silver Anthill episode in Chapter 1, but it's one of the cliches I do enjoy when it's being used properly. So with that, this gets a 5 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 6 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 32 out of 50 total score. And right after that, we get to something that's less than appealing to me. Chapter 4, Episode 8, The Vanishing of Mr. Blue. Now right off the bat, I could already tell that something wasn't right as soon as Mrs. Blue gave her explanation. And like the Tuatara episode, it pretty much just repeats the moral of the episode onto this. Yet the execution is still well done. So that's a 4 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 5 for entertainment value, 4 for mystery factor, and 6 for shock factor, with a 27 out of 50 total score. Okay, I just gotta say, this next episode was a lot more interesting than episode 5. Mainly because a lot of things just seemed to happen out of the blue at first, but then it all started to make sense as the episode progressed. Chapter 4, Episode 9, The Bat Who Couldn't Remember, was truly a unique ride. From trying to help a bat who basically suffered from amnesia, to scaling up a mountain, to avoiding deadly rock slides, and eventually helping out the bat's family in the end. Now I'm gonna be honest here. While this episode is gonna have pretty much the same ratings as the average TCC episodes, I'm gonna have to give a perfect 10 to the mystery factor category for this one. And while the others had perfect 10s in their rating on the other categories, please hear me out here. This is because orange-furred bats, according to Google and the Fact File segment, scientists have only just recently discovered this species of bats. Native to West Africa, as well as living in caves atop mountains, discovered in 2018 and officially described in 2021. I also love how the amnesiac orange-furred bat in this episode, Nimba, got her name from the actual scientific name of this species, and I'm sorry in advance if I mispronounced this. Nimba myotis or Myotis nimbensis. If you add all the scientific facts into this episode, and the anticlimactic but admittedly clever ending, I guess it's safe to say they really cooked with this one. And with that yap session done, this episode gets a 6 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, the perfect 10 for mystery factor, and an 8 for shock factor, with a 38 out of 50 total score. Now, remember when I said back when I was talking about episode 5B in chapter 3 that there was a secondary character that I hated more than the Kias in that episode? Well, let me introduce you to this bastard. In chapter 4, episode 10, The Hidden Hitchhiker, he has single-handedly pissed me off throughout the times when he was on screen and yapping and complaining about the most mundane stuff. Like, okay, I get that you're freaking dehydrated and crap, but come on, man. The two people that want to help you out are also stuck together back to back with only one arm each still available because by some weird coincidence they got freaking stuck like that. But also, they're stuck like that because of you, mate. And you're the one bitching about being dehydrated and them wanting to help you out. Like, how can I stay empathetic towards you with that attitude? Like, cut them some slack, you slimy piece of shit. My apologies for my language back there. I should probably calm down before I lose my cool, but for real, every time I look back into this episode, I'm wondering if all the secondary characters were high on something because nothing seemed to make sense. I mean, except for Sam and Kit, of course, because they were the ones in the middle of all this mess. But also the fact that the Stinkwells were not any better with their jokes as well, but maybe that's just them even without being high on anything. Okay, this next part is now my AvGeek self talking here, as something in this episode unrelated to the slimy bastard pissed off that part of me just as much. Okay, so, can anyone from Clade, in charge of designing the freaking aircraft in this agency, tell me upfront why the shit would the manual override switch be on the damn wingtip engine? This is genuinely the worst aircraft design decision I think Clade has ever made. I mean, it should have been placed somewhere more accessible, but at the same time, placed somewhere it couldn't be engaged accidentally, like, oh, I don't know, an access panel under the floor of the plane, perhaps? How hard is it to do that? Like, that button is just gonna add some additional drag on one side of the plane anyway. Alright, thank you, AbGeek Self. You can go back to the main channel now. Now, back to the slimy bastard. If there is one thing that really sealed the deal with how much I despise him with a burning passion, it would be this last scene of the episode, where said slimy bastard just went and took the spray bottle from them when Sam and Kit could have used it on themselves if they got stuck again. And in this case, they did, but not as much as before. But mate, you're already in your damningly damp habitat, so why the shit would you keep that for yourself, you ungrateful But then there's also the fact that he's still convinced that he was kidnapped by Sam and Kit, when it was clearly a fucking misunderstanding! Okay, I really should calm down before I lose any more of my cool there. I'm sorry. While I could rant on and on about this, and maybe even go as far as to make a dedicated video about this, highly unlikely though, I still have a ranking video to finish up. And just to add one more side tangent to this, I have no idea why, but I was feeling hesitant to watch this particular episode for this video. Like, something's really telling me not to get freshly pissed at the slimy bastard again for my sanity's sake. But whatever the reason is, still, much to my displeasure, I psyched myself up and rewatched the episode. As much as I really wish I didn't, there was one thing that kept me from punching a hole through my screen, and that's reminding myself about the excellent teamwork my favorite detective duo did just to save the ungrateful slug. I am still unreasonably pissed at him though. And so to conclude the ranking for the Chapter 4 episodes, Episode 10 gets an 8 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, 5 for mystery factor, and an 8 for shock factor, with a 36 out of 50 total score. Because as much as I hated that slimy bastard in this one, I can't help but admire, as I've already mentioned, the teamwork that Sam and Kit showed even while they were stuck together like that. Usually in something like this in TV shows or movies, they'd be struggling at first, and they did. But when they decided to get to work on helping the slimy bastard, they were operating like a freaking well-oiled machine. And to some extent, two well-oiled machines that are stuck together against their will. I even go as far as to say they managed to get it done a lot faster than what I'd normally expect from a cliche like that. And so that's Chapter 4 for you all. And to be honest, this is probably one of the best chapters in the series during that time. And I agree with Tweak Amami in her video talking about Chapter 5. And while it also had its errors and mistakes, it was still a very solid chapter for the show. And I really hope all the others would be the same. Okay, I just decided to re-record the rest of the chapters because, I don't know, I just felt like it, so yeah. We are at Chapter 5 of this TCC episode ranking video. And like in Chapter 4, every episode here is listed as just one single 16-minute episode per segment instead of the 2 shorter episodes per segment like in Chapters 1 and 3. However, this chapter is an episode short compared to the previous one. But that's because this chapter contains the third 27-minute long feature episode of the entire series. So let's not waste any more time and proceed with Chapter 5, Episode 1, The Mystery of the Missing Milk. Okay, this chapter is not off to a good start in terms of first episode impressions for a new chapter. But that's not to say I didn't enjoy watching a new episode from a new chapter. I mean, come on, it's always an enjoyable experience if it captures your attention enough to keep you engaged the whole time. And this was that exact case here, so I'll cut it some slack. So I'll give this a 5 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and a 6 for shock factor, with a 30 out of 50 total score. We're back in the African grasslands, people! And hey, it's Reggie and the Genet from the Raging Rhinos episode again. What a wonderful surprise. Now aside from that awesome cameo, Chapter 5, Episode 2, The Puzzle of the Pink Kangaroo, that rhymes, It's a very trippy episode, so to speak. Bonus points for the wacky but fun visuals throughout the chase scene, and the general concept of seeing things under UV light that Kit mentioned at one point really makes you wonder. What exactly is in a certain plant or animal that makes it glow a different color under this particular kind of light? Now, I won't go into too much detail, but basically, plants and animals that do this are able to do it through a process called biofluorescence, where they have special compounds in their bodies that absorb the UV light shining at them and then emitting it back as low energy visible light that's a different kind of light wave from UV. Compared to bioluminescence, biofluorescence is a passive process produced by a chemical reaction. And Kit was right about not knowing why they do this actually. A Google search told me that it may simply be a byproduct of a plant or animal's chemical makeup with no special function whatsoever, but we could also assume that this might be used for camouflage, communication, or for predators luring prey towards them. Don't take ammo facts from me though, I just did a single Google search for that information. So that's an 8 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 37 out of 50 total score. Okay, I'll stop the unwarranted fact drops now, but yet again, they really got the facts right here. Well done, Creature Cases. Alright, I really wish Chapter 5, Episode 3, The Vanished Valentine, was shown on Valentine's Day, but I guess they couldn't release it on time. Plus the fact that they still needed to release all the other episodes as one bundle, so I don't blame them for this. However, I really love the character design of the Red Panda couple. They look really sweet together, and this really gives me Turning Red vibes. Damn you, Turning Red. So with nothing else to say about this episode, this gets an 8 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 35 out of 50 total score. Now, I just want to take a moment to congratulate this lungfish in this episode, Leonard, for being the complete opposite of what the slimy bastard from Chapter 4, Episode 10 was. I mean, sure, Leonard had a handful of valid crash outs as he was literally dying from the heat and dehydration, but so was the slimy bastard. But Leonard was more chill about it when Sam and Kit eventually made it up to him despite the previous mistakes. And in the end, what does he do? He's genuinely grateful for Sam and Kit's help. No sticky end to this episode or anything, though it's a rather wet one. Not to mention, Leonard was being a pretty badass near the end of the episode. And I also want to mention the science behind the little contraption that Kit made. Science, baby! Also, Janet from the Raging Rhinos episode makes another cameo! Also, lungfish are probably the most interesting fish I've ever seen. In some cases, they're also pretty adorable, so there you go. A picture of a lungfish. And one more side note.
Leonard, you're getting really dried out. You need all the water you can get. Maybe we can squeeze the water out.
Kit, I know you're a zoologist, but did you really have to emphasize that in the episode? What the heck? And with that, episode 4 gets a 7 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 8 for shock factor, with a 41 out of 50 total score. Episode 5, The Riddle of the Rash, is an interesting one. I didn't know handling a specific bird can give you a rash similar to what poison ivy would give you, and more specifically, the bird in question is a hooded pitahui bird. This guy right here. Not to mention, they're the most poisonous birds in the world! This also reminds me of a similar creature, albeit an amphibian, which is the poison dart frog. One touch and your skin will become irritated and rashy. And worst case scenario, you can experience paralysis! Or worse, if the poison gets in your system via cuts or open wounds, so stay safe out there, peeps. Also, I love the continuity from the very first episode of the series. That part where Kit mentions something about poison, then the train engineer not so subtly grimacing about it. Like she's got that bad PTSD from Chapter 1, Episode 1. I feel bad, but at the same time, I love the throwback reference. Now, in general, I really dig this episode, and I really dig Hootie here. Such a cheery fella. So this will get an 8 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 6 for mystery factor, and an 8 for shock factor, with a 36 out of 50 total score. Chapter 5, Episode 6, The Mystery on Yeti Mountain, was still an okay episode. And spoiler alert, it wasn't a Yeti. My only gripe was that they discovered the animals behind the destroyed crops way too soon, but I'm guessing this is to give way for the migration part of the episode. Also, another Wally Bungler appearance, but he was genuinely the most useful I've ever seen in any episode before this. I mean, he still does the pratfall nosedive entrance and the first few minutes of jokes, but the rest of the way, he managed to calm the Himalayan Tars down so that Sam and Kit could help them get to their new grazing grounds up the mountain. Kinda makes me want to salute the bumbling bastard for once. I mean, he was also shown the spotlight back in chapter 3, but that's a different story. Now, I don't know if they meant for this to mean something, but the Himalayan Tar is listed as near threatened by the IUCN Red List, which basically means they're endangered because of the hunting and habitat loss. This episode seems to portray the latter, since it shows the Tars losing a route they go up to in areas where they normally graze, but this is mostly because of nature doing its thing. Again, I don't know if they meant for this to have a secret meaning, but I still like it nonetheless. And with that, this gets a 6 for title appeal, 5 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 6 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 30 out of 50 total score. I'm not sure if I simply forgot, but this is the only time I've seen them go in the Aussie land down under. And mate, that country alone is full of different animal species. I'm surprised they don't make that many episodes that take place there. Anyways, Chapter 5, Episode 7, The Case of the Mislaid Egg, was a pretty underwhelming one, save for the chase scenes and the incredibly badass save from the duo. But also, the Goanna lizard in this episode is like a true embodiment of an American Karen. I'm sorry, I don't mean to be racist here, but seriously though, why on earth do people like that exist? And I'm not talking about just the Karens in the US of A, though when I say true embodiment, I mean it. And while the salamander mom from Chapter 3 Episode 2b was acting very Karen-like, she had good reasons to be frustrated. I'll say it again, she was a soon-to-be mom, and she's just worried about her eggs. But this lizard, buddy, she just wants an infertile baby in a shell for a meal. And I'm not talking about her own eggs, because that would very obviously be cannibalism. Oh my gosh, that side tangent got dark real quick. But anyway, we got a damn good fun fact about Knuckles in this episode. They're one of the 2 mammals in the world that lay eggs. There's about 4 echidna species, with them and the platypus being in a group known as monotremes, which was a really cool thing to learn about, to say the least. So with that, this gets a 6 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 35 out of 50 total score. Philip Knight, the Night Monkey, makes his appearance yet again, this time here in the next episode. Chapter 5, Episode 8, The Sneaky Stick Stealer. I also love how Peggy knows about Philip, but my guess is that Sam and Kit may have mentioned him to her at one point off screen. Also, Philip is a dad! Also, he mentions that Night Monkey dads spent a lot of time taking care of their kids, but where was Junior during Philip's first appearance in the show back in Chapter 1? Maybe it was his wife's turn to take care of Junior at that time? Who knows? I also love how they're revisiting the location where the duo and Philip first met. Man, lots of side character reappearances in this show, but I gotta say, it's still clever how they pull it off in the first place. One more thing to note. It's funny how it wasn't a bird stealing sticks around the jungle, but a freaking bear! More specifically, a spectacled bear, aka the Andean bear because they live in the Andes Mountains in northern and western South America. And true to real life, the spectacled bear in this episode uses the sticks, and also the floorboards apparently, to make platforms high up in the trees, not just for eating and sleeping, but also to reach the fruits high up on the trees. I also just learned that Paddington is a spectacled bear. Nice. I just want to say before giving my score, Philip Knight might be the most goated side character in this show, and I really hope he makes another appearance in future chapters. And on that note, this gets a 7 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 9 for shock factor, with a 38 out of 50 total score. And now, we're finally gonna talk about the 3rd feature episode in this series. And it's none other than Chapter 5, Episode 9, The Baffling Badger Affair. What really sets this episode aside from the other 2 feature episodes of this show, aside from the rather unconventional title card presentation, is the fact that we are finally, after 4 whole chapters of waiting, 3 if you don't count Chapter 2, we get some actual canonical backstory on how our dynamic duo came to be. But to be honest, it kind of rehashes another moral from way back in Chapter 3. In Episode 5A, the Lost Capybara Kids, both were arguing about which of their skill sets they should train in the training area first. Either Sam's mastered detective skills or Kit's animal know-how. And then, in the actual case, they're still arguing about this same thing, with them obviously reconciling at the end of the episode. But also, this makes me wonder. Chapter 5, Episode 9 is mostly a backstory episode, meaning this takes place at an earlier time when Sam and Kit were just getting to know each other. And yes, they did face this same kind of argument way back when. But now, looking at Chapter 3, Episode 5A, this made me realize that, canonically, that would be the second time they argued during their time as work partners about which skill set was the most superior. And yes, work partners would have this tendency to argue about old things they thought they'd already set aside back then, and I can understand that. I also don't know if that's a cliche, as I haven't put much research into that part, I'm sorry. But while this episode was a good look at Sam and Kit's first case together, that does not mean I'm gonna ignore the fact that Wally just has footage of the two of them on said first case, then just casually playing it to the audience like it's a regular episode. Makes me wonder if Wally was just watching them back then to see if they had potential to be buddies, then made his proper appearance in Chapter 1, Episode 2B, but that's just my take on it. My only gripe with this is that, while the last two feature-length episodes have good reason to keep playing out the story without it getting too boring, I feel like this one was just trying way too hard and failing, giving us a lot of cringeworthy moments throughout the middle of the episode. But, hear me out, I had to keep reminding myself that this episode took place back when they didn't have the teamwork and synergy of the present-day Sam and Kit. Back then, they were still getting used to each other's company. And naturally, yes, that can also warrant a lot of cringeworthy moments, I should know. I've had a lot of that with classmates back then, now close friends of mine. But in my opinion, I think this is what makes these characters feel grounded after I finished watching the episode. Witnessing their first ever case closed fist bump from the past, it felt surreal. Like, there was this feeling inside that told me this would be the start of everything we now know today. Man, that specific fist bump really hit different. Kudos, TCC. So overall, while this had its flaws like the others, this was still an awesome feature-length episode. And a really good backstory episode even. If the people behind the creature cases decided to make a canonical backstory episode for each of the two main protagonists, I'd be all in for it. But for now, since we don't have that yet, I'll stick to reading fanfiction, thank you very much. And with that, I'm giving this a 10 for title appeal. Very unique title card presentation, and I love it. A 9 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, another 8 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 42 out of 50 total score. And that wraps up Chapter 5. Now, this was definitely something. It was a major improvement from the 4th chapter. And yes, there's also the 27-minute long feature episode, like the 3rd one I may add, and it was definitely something, alright. I originally wanted to have everything about this video done before the 6th chapter's release back in the 15th of December 2025, but because college finals for the first semester pulled me away from finishing the script on time, I wasn't able to finish before then. Good thing I was able to finish everything during my Christmas break, but anyway, this is the first time we had 2 chapter releases in the same year. The release of Chapter 2 on the same year as Chapter 1 does not count because it's just one episode, mind you. Normally, we see a new chapter every year with varying release dates. In addition, this is our first time having a chapter release in the same year. That also isn't just one episode. Yeah, I'm looking at you, Chapter 2. No, that doesn't mean I'm explicitly disappointed at Chapter 2 for having just one episode. I just initially thought that the Christmas special was just gonna be an addition to the already existing first chapter at the time. But with that aside, let's finally end this ranking video off with a bang as we get started with Chapter 6, Episode 1, The Beehive Burglar. And look at that! We're at the Watering Hole Club from back in Chapter 1. Now, unfortunately, no Reggie or Jen at this time. But we have someone even better! Sweetie, the honey badger. And he makes his appearance yet again. And I have to mention the continuity of this episode as well, as back in Chapter 1, in that episode, where we first encountered Sweetie as the supposed twist antagonist, then later on in that episode, him and the queen of the affected colony made an agreement that Sweetie would get honey in exchange for him guarding the colony's hive. I'll say this again, talk about mutualistic relationship. And that seemed to work well. Up until that fateful night, however, where Sweetie was accused of stealing the honey after a beehive robbery took place in the dead of night. But this time, it really wasn't Sweetie who stole the honey. I feel like the Creature Cases people are really upping their game this chapter, Because after researching about Death's Head Hawkmoths after watching the episode, I realized that they get their name from the skull-like pattern on their heads. And then, the Death's Head Hawkmoth in this episode also had a skull on the back of her head, though it's like it's tattooed on there by the looks of it. Still, that's attention to detail I can admire for weeks on end. So with that, the first chapter 6 episode gets a 7 for title appeal, another 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and a 7 for shock factor, with a 41 out of 50 total score. I might be getting a bit biased the more episodes I rate, but looking back at the scores I gave for the previous episodes and then the scores for the most recent ones, I'd say it's a major improvement on the part of the Creature Cases people making the show happen, and I highly congratulate you on that, TCC production team. Avast me, hearties! Episode 2, The Shadow of the Sky Pirates, dead ahead! Anyway, this episode felt like a fresh take in this most recent chapter. We've never had anything pirate-themed in this series up until now, and honestly, I was doubting that it might be a late Halloween kind of episode. Thankfully, I was wrong. It's just Wally again. But this time, he's a pirate! And the best part, we get to see the flight packs again since Chapter 1, Episode 1. Yes, they were never used again after the first ever episode of the series until this one. Almost 6 chapters later. But anyway, this episode had a good amount of suspense in it. I mean, they are battling pirates in this episode, which again was something we've never seen in the show until now. And for those who don't know, or for those who usually skip the fact file part, Arctic skuas, aka parasitic Jaegers, are migratory birds and are indeed called pirates of the sky. They're fast and agile, steal from the other birds in the area, and then retreat to their nests on the ground, which is usually located around the general North Pacific or North Atlantic area, and then they winter across the southern hemisphere. Not to mention they're also pretty aggressive, so be careful if you just so happen to run into them. So now episode 2 gets a 7 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, a 6 for mystery factor, and an 8 for shock factor, with a 41 out of 50 total score. Both episodes 1 and 2 are tied. Let's see which of the other episodes can break said tie. From Sky Pirate skuas in the Arctic to Nordic Viking lemmings. I like how episode 3, The Legend of Lemmingland, as well as the previous episode, touched on ancient ages of seafaring. Though, in a real-life combat situation, if these two were to meet, then the pirates would have the upper hand against Vikings due to them having more advanced and ranged weaponry like flintlocks and others that use gunpowder, compared to the pure melee weapons that Vikings use. Okay, enough history talk, let's get on with the episode ranking. I'm surprised that despite the lemmings worrying about the predators in Predator Gulch later in the episode, they've been completely ignoring the fact that the two animals helping them out the whole time are also predators themselves. But I guess fear gave way for confusion during the initial introduction after Kit's unconventional way of getting their attentions at first, and even Sam at the end. It was just a sweet topping to this episode cake. However, with nothing else to say, I'm giving this one an 8 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 5 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 32 out of 50 total score. Mostly because it's just them going from one place to another, montage style, which got boring too quickly. My apologies. Now this is the episode where I watched the preview in my reaction video. Chapter 6, Episode 4, The Riddle of the Lion's Roar, sees Junior Agent Cubby making her appearance as an official secondary character yet again. This also has one of my favorite moments of the chapter, with Cubby being an absolute badass on the hoverboard. Now, I'll admit, watching that preview for my previous TCC video really spoiled that moment for me, knowing it's gonna happen at that point of the episode. Even still, what followed when I watched the full thing still managed to pleasantly surprise me and my ADHD brain. Nothing much to say about this aside from my points just now, and I also learned that southern ground hornbills are the largest species of hornbill worldwide. So that explains Harry's size almost matching Cubby's. And I also really love how they take every detail into account, even going as far as to mention the white feathers under their wings. I like that. So it's 7 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 8 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and 9 for shock factor, with a 32 out of 50 total score. Now, it was honestly very difficult to take Chapter 6, Episode 5, The Burrow of the Booty Bumper. I'm sorry. Sorry. It was honestly very difficult to take Chapter 6, Episode 5 seriously the whole time I watched it, but if there's anything that this episode taught us, it's that wombats plug the holes of their burrows using their behinds to keep other animals away. And also the fact that they have square poop. Now, aside from the hilarious title and pretty much every time is mentioned, this was a rather entertaining episode with a very wholesome ending to it too. If this didn't make me crave for more cases happening in Australia, I don't know what will. So now this episode gets an 8 for title appeal, 6 for story progression, almost a perfect 10 for entertainment value, so it's a 9, 8 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 38 out of 50 total score. Just want to mention, I watched the next 3 episodes during my flight to Singapore. You can check out my video on my main channel. What struck me surprised about Chapter 6, Episode 6, The Missing Pack Member, was the fact that it's also the first time they showed any sort of fire in the episode. Even this episode's thumbnail on the episode list itself looked rather scary, with that freeze frame of the fire on one side of the frame and Kit on the other side. Why do I say this? Maybe it's because I don't get to see a lot of scary looking fire in a lot of kids' media. Hello, it's Paul here from Paul Aviation, where it's all things Paw Patrol and aviation, and I'm making my very quick cameo here to talk about the fire in Paw Patrol. There's very little of that in the entire show, basically speaking, save for one instance in Season 1, Marshall's Ultimate Rescue episodes and the Fire Rescue spin-off, which really makes Marshall's role as a fire pup useless in the vast majority of missions, unless his ladder is used, but that's pretty much it. In other cases, we just see smoldering wood or smoke and stuff like that. And here's the list of normal episodes where they actively showed what a decent fire is. And they say Zuma is the most underused pup. I mean, Marshall just appears mostly in advertising because he's numbered 03, but I guess that changed in Fire Rescue and the Ultimate Rescue episodes where he's the focus, since the episodes there are obviously revolving around fire-related rescue ops. Okay, thank you for that, Paul from Paul Aviation. Now back to episode 6. I feel like they hit a foul ball with this one, because the minute I saw the situation that Wanda was in, every ounce of suspense in me that I felt up until that point seemed to vaporize out of existence. Like, don't tell me that she just happened to climb up a rock that had a thin boundary of sticks around it that just so happened to be ignited by a stray lightning strike by pure coincidence. If anything, it almost feels like this was staged, in my opinion. I mean, if she was up on a tree and the wildfire was more spread out on a wider area, then that could have been a more realistically precarious situation, but oh well. We can't change what's already out there. So with that being said, it's a 9 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 6 for entertainment value, 7 for mystery factor, and 5 for shock factor, with a 40 out of 50 total score. Just looking at the thumbnail of episode 7, The Invisible Frog, I could immediately tell that the frog in question was a glass frog, and I was right. I guess that's because I found a stray YouTube short in my feed talking about glass frogs one time and found it really fascinating, so that's fun. But also, I've been wondering, thanks to the peeps in the TCC Discord server, I now realize that if the glass frog in this episode could talk, then why didn't the other frogs from previous episodes talk either? But in this case, as well as Chapter 1, Episode 6b, both the glass frog in this episode and the spotted frog in the other are both from the South American jungle. The Discord server peeps are not entirely sure either, so your guess is as good as mine. While inconsistencies aside, I love how these stink whales really express their German nationality by overusing the word Wunderbar, which literally translates to wonderful, and then that key detail being the one that managed to shut down the cleaner bots at the end through a password, which also happened to be the same word. And I just want to mention, I found out that there's a bar in the UK that's also called Wunderbar, as in Wonder Bar. Clever naming. And one more thing. This almost gave me Chapter 4, Episode 10 flashbacks. We will not mention that ever again. But at least the frog was genuinely grateful he was back to his home habitat. And at least he knows he didn't mean to be brought along with Sam and Kit. I'm looking at you, you slimy bastard! So now Episode 7 gets a 7 for title appeal, 8 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 6 for mystery factor, and 7 for shock factor, with a 42 out of 50 total score. Gosh, the Chapter 6 episodes are on a tie spree on this one. Now this next one is another surreal feeling episode, but for a different reason. Episode 8, The Island of the Lost Rabbits, sees a duo in a remote island with nothing but a clade wilderness guidebook in order to solve their case. And in this case, pun intended, they are there to look for lost Amami rabbits, with no technology whatsoever, which was something I didn't expect, even though the episode description on Netflix already explicitly stated it. And looking back at the previous episodes, I guess they were pretty reliant on their tech to solve cases. And this also teaches us that sometimes, even without tech, you can get the job done with a bit of ingenuity, but maybe also a Clade Wilderness guidebook, or perhaps any form of guidance, if you will. And this also reminds me of a lot of the survival shows that my dad likes to binge on the Discovery Channel on TV, so that's nice. But I also feel like this was yet another missed opportunity for the episode to have something just a little bit better. Not that the precarious scenario was not precarious enough. I mean, seeing baby Amami rabbits stranded high up a cliffside is terrifying enough. No, it's because I feel like they took them way too long to mention the Clade Wilderness guidebook, and then making it the extensive tool that they used more often as the action stuff was in its climax stage. For context, Sam and Kit set foot on the island at about 3 minutes and 21 seconds into the episode timeline. And it wasn't until 4 minutes later it was mentioned again by Sam, who somehow never had a book-shaped mark from the book itself being way too big to fit in the normal undercoat pocket. But I guess cartoon logic is gonna cartoon logic here. I kinda expected them to refer to the guidebook immediately after realizing the first time that they forgot they had no gear with them, which should have been what usually happens in these situations in pretty much any sort of media I watch. Characters forget that they either don't have their usual tools or they lost it, so they look for an alternative right off the bat. But I guess in this case they tried to change that, which I do appreciate the boldness in taking the cliche in a different way. But also in this one frame, Kit almost went full Italiano mode for a split second there. Also, I never mentioned this before, but I really don't like the awkward pauses in between stating file facts, though I can at least give them some credit in trying to fill in those pauses with the My Squad's own comments. This is also the first time that they ever went to the Japan area of Asia, so that's another noteworthy thing. So episode 8 gets an 8 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 6 for mystery factor, and an 8 for shock factor, with a 36 out of 50 total score. I also really loved the twist at the end where the predatory snake turned out to be an undercover Clade agent being part of their test, though that mirage was sort of ruined the moment she mentioned the Clade clause. Chapter 6, Episode 9, The Mystery of the Missing Acorns, is also full of shit, but not in the way you'd expect. Alright? Hear me out. And yes, it has to do with Kit's line of work again. Though if anything, this episode actually had the most wholesome ending that beat all the others in this whole series. I expected that Grizzly to already have her babies, seeing the numerous milk bottles on the shelves in her cave. I didn't expect her to still be carrying said babies in her womb at the time. Nonetheless, that made the ending part a very wholesome scene that, again, beat the other wholesome scenes in this whole series. Unfortunately, on the other hand, the episode also came with a lot of flaws. One major flaw was forgetting to mention the exact species of woodpecker that does this method of storing food. This granary tree in this episode is the work of an acorn woodpecker. And after some light digging, I learned that this granary system is being primarily utilized by this specific type of woodpecker, while most other woodpeckers prefer the sap from trees or the insects that crawl on them. Though they were at least spot on with the fact that these granary trees can store up to 50,000 acorns at a time. Secondly, and I don't think this is that big of a deal as I just wanted to point this out, but they've been really emphasizing Kit's obsession with animal dung lately. From subtle hints to downright Chapter 5, Episode 4 kind of thing. Like, I know this is most definitely part of a zoologist's line of work, but it may be getting rather excessive at this point. But that's maybe just me. I don't know about you guys. Also, that major hint before the case was somehow only made significant after the duo got Wendy's acorns back. Yet another missed opportunity here, but that's not to say this episode was anywhere near the level of bad. Just to put it simply, but respectfully, more flawed than the others. Heck, I even noticed the lack of fact-dropping from Kit while she and Sam were being briefed by Peggy before the actual case-solving part of the episode. But as much as I don't want to ignore these flaws, I still had a wonderful time watching the episode itself. So this gets a 6 for title appeal, 7 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and an 8 for shock factor, with a 36 out of 50 total score. And finally, to end this whole saga off, for now, we have Chapter 6, Episode 10, The Thirsty Thief. Okay, first of all, while trying to look for a missing spigot was one thing, I honestly expected the problem to be a lot more significant. Because firstly, that problem could have been easily solvable by making another hole and creating a makeshift faucet from said hole, or you could just open the barrel from the top and maybe scoop the water with a drinking glass to pour into other drinking glasses for the customer to use. I really don't know about you guys, but this was probably the most pointless case they ever had to solve, but I digress. But also, because of the lack of fact dropping in the previous episode, I was pleasantly surprised when Sam was the one who made up for that when he explained what a spigot was. Basically, the part of a faucet that controls water flow. You're welcome. I'm also surprised that Kit doesn't remember those two Gila monsters who bit her in each of her arms like 6 chapters ago. I mean, they do make their appearance yet again, which was honestly unexpected, but the lack of a throwback reference was disappointing. And yet another instance where the major hint in the pre-case scene wasn't made significant until the near end of the episode. In this case, Sam's mastery at untangling everything, or maybe I'm just used to the previous episodes really making use of the major hints of the moral, or something else in the scenes of the duo in the headquarters before they got called to Peggy's office. So to finish off this entire ranking video, this gets us 7 for title appeal, 8 for story progression, 7 for entertainment value, 8 for mystery factor, and 10 for shock factor, with a 40 out of 50 total score. Why did this score a perfect 10 in shock factor? Simply because of this mole lizard creature. This alone made me question nature all over again. And if I told myself before that I've seen everything already, boy was I wrong. And there we go. That's all the current Creature Cases episodes ranked. And now for the fun part. Putting them all in a leaderboard to see which of these episodes has the highest total score of the entire roster so far. And thanks to the website Score Leader, not sponsored by the way, I punched in all the scores of the respective episodes. And the title holder of the best TCC episode goes to... drumroll... Chapter 4, Episode 3, with a total score of 45 to 50. And coming in at first runner-up is actually a two-way tie between Chapter 5, Episode 9 and Chapter 6, Episode 7. Both rocking a total score of 42 to 50. The second runner-up is a three-way tie. We have Chapter 5, Episode 4, as well as Chapter 6, Episodes 1 and 7, all three with a total score of 41 to 50. And finally, the third runner-up is another three-way tie between Chapter 1, Episode 1 and Chapter 6, Episodes 6 and 10, with a total score of 40 to 50 for all three. I just want to say, you guys, this was definitely something else. Like, this has become a very passionate project of mine ever since I started writing the script back in June of 2025. And I never got to finish it until now. The date is January 8th at the time of recording this clip and finishing the script as well. So, safe to say, it was definitely a wild ride for me. Like, I had to balance a lot during that time. Finals were very freaking hectic, let me tell you guys. And it was also money draining, to say the least. I'm not gonna disclose any more information on that. But I just want to tell you guys, I really appreciate your support, even after I've been going through a content drought lately, both in this and the main channel. So, on that note, thank you guys so much for watching. If you have your own rankings for all the Creature Cases episodes so far, let me know in the comments down below. And additionally, if you want to post your expectations for a future Chapter 7 in the comments down below, please do so. But if you want to do it in a Discord, then the links are in the description down below for both my server and the official Creature Cases Discord server for the fandom website. So go check that out if you have time. I would really appreciate it. The support is much appreciated. I love you guys so much, and thank you so much for making it this far into the video. You guys are officially awesome. And so on that note, be sure to give this video a like if you enjoyed, and subscribe to this channel and my main channel, Paul Aviation, where it's all things Paw Patrol and aviation. This is Paul, signing out. Bye-bye.